The following presentation will demonstrate how LTI 1.3 and OpenID Connect are used to improve the security around the LTI ecosystem. To properly understand how the security is improved in LTI 1.3 over LTI 1.1, first we need to have a look at exactly what LTI 1.1 was doing and how that flow works, then how that flow can be potentially abused or exploited, and then how LTI 1.3 and OpenID Connect solve that issue. So let's wind back the clock and have a look at how LTI 1.1 works. For a basic LTI 1.1 launch, you're going to need three separate parties. The first one is the platform. And in this case, we've got a university representing the platform. Then you're going to need a tool. So our tool is the test factory. And then lastly, you need a user. In this case, we have Godfrey here. So Godfrey wants to use the test factory. And if he wants to use the test factory, he first has to go to his university and say, hey, I've got a test that I need to take at the test factory. Can you give me a letter that I can take to the test factory to tell them what I need to do? So the university is going to give Godfrey a letter, and that letter is going to have information in it saying who Godfrey is, which test he needs to take, and any extra information that the test factory might need to know. The university is then going to sign that letter and say, this is approved by us, and allow the test factory to know that it is a valid letter and that Godfrey is who he says he is. So Godfrey is going to go and take that letter over to the test factory, and the test factory are going to look at the signature and open the letter. The signature is valid, and the letter has all the information about who Godfrey is and what test he needs to take. So Godfrey is going to go and take the test, and everything works out. Now, let's see how that same flow can potentially be abused or manipulated by somebody who has a malicious intent. Right, let's go back to the beginning. And again, this time we're going to have a different user. This user is called Steve. So Steve is not a model student. Steve, instead of doing the test himself, he wants to force Godfrey to take the test for him or trick him into doing it. So the way that Steve would go about doing this is that Steve would first go to the university and say, hey, university, I've got a test that I need to take. It's going to be at the test factory. Can you give me a letter to take to the test factory to tell them about my test? The university gives them the letter and signs that letter with all of the information about who Steve is and which test he needs to take. Steve can now take that letter to the test factory, but instead of doing that, what he does is he takes it to Godfrey, and he implants that letter onto Godfrey. Now that Godfrey has that letter with all of Steve's information in it, Steve tells Godfrey that he can go to the test factory to take his test. Godfrey now goes to the test factory thinking that he's going to take a test for himself, and he hands over the letter. The test factory looks at the letter, and the letter has a signature by the university and information inside it that is all valid. But the problem is here is the information inside that letter are telling the test factory Steve's information, not Godfrey's. So Godfrey has just taken that test on behalf of Steve. So there you can see how it's possible to manipulate the flow in LTI 1.1 to allow for somebody who is acting maliciously to potentially inject themselves into a workflow. Now, this still requires a minimal amount of social engineering to allow it to work, but that could be something as simple as clicking on a link in an email or telling somebody to go to a particular website. So let's see how LTI 1.3 and OpenID Connect solve this issue. Let's start again where we were before. we're going to go to our university with Godfrey. And this time, Godfrey, instead of asking for an envelope with all of his information in it, he's just going to ask for an envelope. He's going to say, hey, I need to take a test at the test factory. And the university is going to say, okay, well, go to the test factory and tell the test factory you're going to take a test. Doesn't matter which test that is at the moment. You just need to know that you're going to do a test. So Godfrey has this empty envelope, and he's going to take it over to the test factory. The test factory are going to look at the envelope and say, oh, I see that you're going to do a test. Here, I'm going to stamp that envelope with a number. They also, at the same time, give that same number to Godfrey. Now, Godfrey and that envelope are linked to one another by the test factory. Godfrey can now go back to his university and say, I've got my stamped envelope from the test factory. Can you fill it with information? And the university fills that with the information and again signs it. So now we are where we were before in LTI 1.1, where you have a signed letter by the university that Godfrey can take to the test factory. So Godfrey, again, is going to go back over to the test factory with that letter. And the test factory is going to look at the signature on the letter, but also look at the numbers on both Godfrey and the letter to make sure that they match. So all of those things are the same, so they can accept the request and Godfrey can take his test. And they can guarantee here that Godfrey is the person who that letter belonged to. So they know that Godfrey is who he says he is, and that letter was meant for him. So to prove that that actually works and that you couldn't do what we saw with LTI 1.1, where a bad party tries to inject themselves into that workflow, let's have a look what would happen if we introduce Steve again. So like before, Steve goes to his university, but this time he can't get a signed letter straight away. First, he has to be given an envelope. So the university give him an empty envelope, and he takes that envelope over to the test factory. The test factory look at that envelope and say, okay, we need to know who that envelope belongs to. So they stamp the envelope and they stamp Steve. So Steve here now has the number 666 because he's not a very nice person, stamped onto both him and the envelope. He then takes his envelope back to the university. And at the university, he can request that they fill that envelope with information about the test that he wants to take. So the university fills that envelope with the information and then signs it so that it can be taken back to the test factory. Now, again, here we are at the same point that we were at in LTI 1.1, where Steve is going to take that letter and he's going to implant it onto Godfrey. Again, Godfrey now has that letter and he's going to take it to the test factory. But the major difference here is that now that Godfrey has this letter, when the test factory looks at it, that letter has a number on it that is associated to Steve, not to Godfrey. So when the test factory looks at that number, it's going to say, hey, that number is not the same as the person who is trying to use this request. So the letter does not match the person. And at that point, the test factory would not allow Godfrey to take the test, and Godfrey would have been stopped before he was tricked into using Steve's credentials to log in and take the test on behalf of him. And that's it. That's how LTI 1.3 and OpenID Connect allow for a more secure flow between the platform and the tool to guarantee that we know who the users are who are performing actions and logging in between two systems.